The nurse was kind to the lonely patient. She had no idea. He was the owner of the hospital, watching everything. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to leave a like and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's get into the story. Franklin Finch built his empire on a single promise. No patient would ever suffer the way his wife Julia did. 5 years after losing her to medical negligence, the once devoted husband is now the powerful CEO of a chain of hospitalists, including the very one where she died. But success means nothing when your heart is shattered, so Frank does something no one sees coming. He disguises himself as a poor, uninsured patient, walking into St. Mary's Hospital to see for himself how deep the rot goes. What he finds crushes him. Cold doctors, dismissive staff, a system that treats humans like numbers. He's ready to fire everyone, but then she appears. Sarah Adams, an exhausted nurse who pauses in the hallway, sees him in pain and truly sees him. She brings him a blanket, offers him water, holds his hand when the pain becomes too much. "You're not invisible," she whispers. "I'm watching over you." She has no idea that 5 years earlier, she held his wife's hand as she died, and tomorrow, Frank will call her into his office. What he says will change both their lives forever. Some connections go beyond time, death, and even fate. "Get me every patient file from the emergency department," Frank barked into the phone, staring out his penthouse window. "Every case from the last 6 months." "That's thousands of files, sir," his assistant stammered. "What exactly are you looking for?" Frank loosened his silk tie, his temples pounding from another sleepless night. The board praised St. Mary's. Top-tier satisfaction scores, awards for excellence, state-leading efficiency. All lies. He knew better. Whispers from staff, complaints from former patients. Stories that painted a different truth. "Cancel the files," he muttered, ending the call. In the bathroom, he stared at his reflection. Salt and pepper hair, steel gray eyes that earned him the nickname the Shark. At 43, he commanded fear and respect from everyone, but neither respect nor power had ever brought Julia back. It had been 5 years, 7 months, and 16 days since her final breath, since the moment she called his name while he was kept outside powerless. Useless, Frank opened the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside, faded jeans, a plain shirt, scuffed sneakers, all bought from a thrift store down the street. He'd spent 2 days practicing how to move, speak, and act like someone else. Today, Franklin Finch would vanish. And Frank Morrison, a man with chronic back pain and no insurance, would walk into the same hospital where his wife had died. 30 minutes later, Frank sat behind the wheel of a battered old sedan, staring at the building that haunted his nightmares. The same doors. The same place where he'd signed consent papers. And he should have been holding her hand. They charged him $47,000 for the privilege of watching her die. Alone, he pulled his baseball cap low and stepped inside. The emergency room hit him like a physical blow. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow. The waiting area, meant for 30, now held 50. Stretchers lined the walls like forgotten cargo. A woman coughed into a blood-stained tissue. A man clutched his chest, gasping for air. No one noticed. No one moved. At the desk, a young woman with purple hair barely looked up. "Name?" she asked, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Frank Morrison," he said gruffly, limping slightly. "Date of birth, April 15th, 1981. Insurance?" "None." She paused, finally looking at him, not with empathy, but calculation. "What can we charge him?" "Self-pay, then." "Registration fee is $500. That's just to be seen." $500? Just to sit in your waiting room?" "Can't afford it? There's a free clinic 15 miles away. They open at 8 a.m. Frank forced himself to slowly count out $500 in 20s. The clerk's tone softened only slightly. "Fill this out. Someone will call your name." Found a plastic chair wedged between a man who hadn't bathed in weeks, and a girl on the phone crying to someone named Marcus. She was bleeding. No one cared. The form asked for everything: job history, income, assets, rent or own. Not one question about his symptoms. 2 hours passed. The girl was taken back. The unwashed man was scolded by a nurse like a child. Frank's back genuinely hurt now from the hard chair. His stomach growled. He had no change for the vending machine. The lights gave him a pounding headache. This wasn't medical care. It was a test of endurance disguised as healing. Finally, Frank Morrison. A doctor in wrinkled scrubs led him to a small exam room. Says, here you have chronic back pain. How bad is it on a scale from 1 to 10? 7. Numbness. Shooting pain. Sometimes we can do an x-ray. That'll be $800, but honestly, back pain usually goes away with rest. I've been resting. That's why I came in. Doctor finally looked at him. Look, you're young, healthy, and uninsured. This smells like drug-seeking to me. Frank's chest burned. I just paid $500 for you to assume I'm lying. Sir, lower your voice. Just want to be treated like a person. If you keep this up, I'll have security escort you out. Frank stood. Never mind. I'll find help somewhere else. It's probably best. As he walked through the corridors, Frank's chest ached with real grief. This was the system he owned. These were the people who let Julia die. He was going to fire all of them, rebuild from the ground up, hold every single one of them accountable. He reached the exit ready to walk out forever then. Sir? Excuse me, sir. He turned. A woman in scrubs approached with kind, intelligent eyes and a calm, steady voice. You were just in room 4, right? Yes, he said, suspicious. I'm Sarah Adams, one of the nurses here. I overheard part of what happened. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. That shouldn't have happened. Frank blinked. The first human words he'd heard all day. It's fine, he muttered. No, it's not fine, Sarah said firmly. You came here in pain, and you were treated like a liar. That's not okay. She looked around the waiting room, eyes full of real frustration, and even more compassion. Listen, chronic back pain is real. And there are treatments that don't involve narcotics. We can help. Physical therapy, heat, muscle relax, and safe stuff, even without insurance. Frank was stunned. He was faking his condition. And yet, he wanted to hear more. What would you do if you were treating me? She smiled gently. Wait here 10 minutes. Let me check on a few patients. Then I'll do a proper assessment. No charge. You'd really do that? That's why I became a nurse, she said softly. To help people who are hurting. She disappeared into the corridor, and Frank just stood there. He looked around again with new eyes. A nurse helping an old woman fill out paperwork. A janitor adjusting a wheelchair. Security guard tying a little boy's shoes. The system was broken. But maybe not everyone in it was. Maybe the real problem wasn't the staff. It was the people in power. People like him. He sat down to wait. 10 minutes later, Sarah returned with a bottle of water and a small bag. All right, she smiled. Tell me about this back pain. When did it start? What helps? What makes it worse? Frank realized he was about to lie. To the only person who had treated him with kindness. It started 6 months ago, he said. Sometimes it aches. Other times it feels like a knife. Sarah asked thoughtful questions. Explained causes. Suggested treatments that didn't require expensive scans. Then she reached into her bag. Here, she said, handing him a heat pack. It's mine, from home. Use it for 20 minutes tonight. She gave him 3 pills. Ibuprofen. Same thing Dr. Hamilton would have prescribed, except I'm telling you how to use it properly. Frank stared at the gifts in his hands. Why are you doing this? He asked, voice cracking. Sarah looked down, eyes darkening with memory. Because 5 years ago, she paused. I held the hand of a woman in this hospital. She died, calling out for someone who never got to say goodbye. Frank's breath caught in his throat. She didn't know it yet, but that woman, this was his wife. She couldn't save someone who needed saving, Sarah said softly. And I promised myself that I'd never let anyone leave this hospital feeling like they didn't matter. Frank's throat tightened. What happened 5 years ago? A woman came in with cancer complications. We did everything we could, but sometimes everything isn't enough. Her husband was here, and I could see in his eyes how helpless. He felt like the world had forgotten he existed. I held her hand when she passed, and his afterward. I swore I wouldn't let anyone feel that abandoned again. Frank couldn't breathe. The world seemed to blur around him. Cancer complications. A husband who felt forgotten. What was her name? He whispered. Sarah hesitated, surprised by the question. I'm not really supposed to share patient information, but her name was Julia Finch. She was young, brave. She kept asking for her husband until the very end. The heat pack slipped from Frank's hands. The water bottle rolled away across the floor. He stared at Sarah, this woman who had just helped him with kindness and compassion. Was the same nurse who had held Julia's hand while she died? Oh my God, Sarah said, her face going pale. She studied him. You're him. You're her husband. Frank still couldn't speak. You're Franklin Finch, she whispered, her voice. Kraken, I remember you. I remember how lost you looked. How you thanked me for being with her when you couldn't be. Tears streamed down her face. You bought this hospital, she said slowly, because this is where she died. You came here to see what we'd become. Frank nodded, his eyes wet. I'm so sorry, Sarah said, taking his hands in hers. I'm sorry we couldn't save her. I'm sorry you experienced what you did today. I'm sorry this place became what she would have hated. Frank looked down at their joined hands and remembered the last time she'd touched him, pulling him away from Julia's bedside, sitting with him while he called family. You saved her, he said, voice thick. You couldn't save her life, but you saved her from dying alone. You gave her comfort when I wasn't there. I wish I could have done more. You did everything that mattered. They sat quietly, tears falling freely, united by grief, joined by fate. What happens now? Sarah asked. Frank looked around. The system was broken, but not everyone in it was. There were people like Sarah, people who cared. What happens now, Frank said, standing, offering his hand, is that you and I have a long conversation about how to fix this place. And for the first time in 5 years, Frank felt like he might actually keep the promise he'd made at Julia's grave. No patient would suffer like she did. I have ideas, Sarah said, wiping her eyes. So do I. Would you have dinner with me? Tomorrow, to talk about them? She smiled, the first real smile he'd seen all day. I'd like that very much, Mr. Finch. Frank, he corrected. Just Frank. Okay, Frank, but I should warn you, my ideas are expensive, disruptive, and probably unpopular with the board. He thought of the money he'd spent, the people he'd trusted, the failures he'd seen. Sarah, I hope they're exactly that disruptive. Sarah Adams sat in her car after her shift, staring at the business card Frank had given her. Franklin James Finch, CEO Finch, May Solutions, the man nearly thrown out by Dr. Hamilton, had built the entire system. It's the same man she had comforted. 5 years ago, wanted her ideas for fixing it. She called her daughter. Emma, you're not going to believe what happened today. Try me, Emma replied. I met the man whose wife I held when she died, and he asked me to dinner. Are you okay? That sentence was insane. Sarah laughed. Order pizza, baby. I've got calls to make. Later that night, Sarah stood in her modest kitchen, holding a slice of pizza. You gave him your heat pack and pills? Emma asked. He was in pain. Dr. Hamilton had dismissed him. You gave medical supplies to a random patient. Could you get in trouble? Probably. But it was the right thing to do. Emma grinned. You're lucky you're good at your job, Mom. You've been fighting this fight forever. Blankets, food drives. Your notebook full of ideas. And now the CEO wants to hear them. This could be your chance. You think I should go? Yes. And tell him everything. Those late night notes. Your staffing solutions, your protocols. All of it. You know about my notebook, Mom. I pay attention to everything you do. You care? And someone powerful finally wants to listen. Sarah blinked back emotion. What if I mess it up? Then you mess it up, but at least you'll have tried. The next evening, Sarah stood in front of the mirror wearing a simple black dress Emma bought with birthday money. You look beautiful, Emma said. I look nervous. You look like someone about to change the world. What if he thinks I'm just a naive nurse? Then he's an idiot, but I don't think he will. I think he saw how broken the system is. I think he knows you understand how to fix it. Sarah hugged her daughter. I love you, Emma. I love you too. Go save the world. Frank stood in his penthouse, holding the warm heat pack that smelled faintly of lavender and kindness. He walked to his office and opened the file he'd been building: complaints, inefficiencies, failure. But now he was thinking about something else. What would Julia want? The question hit hard. She would want him to build, not destroy. She would want him to find people like Sarah and give them power. She would want no one to feel what he'd felt. He picked up his phone. Clear my calendar tomorrow. Book a table for 2 at Romano's. 7 p.m., yes, sir. Anything else? Get me files on every nurse at St. Mary's. Performance, feedback, years of service. I want to know who the Sarah Adamses are. He ended the call and sat beside a framed photo of Julia. She was laughing, joyful and alive. I found her jewels. He said, her name is Sarah, and she's exactly the kind of person you would have loved. He sat with that memory and let hope bloom again. Tomorrow, he would meet Sarah for dinner. Tomorrow, he would listen. Tomorrow, he would begin rebuilding something better. And tonight, would believe for the first time in years that maybe the best parts of his life weren't behind him after all. All the patients who deserved better care. All the families who needed more compassion. All the healthcare workers who longed to be proud of the work they did. Sarah thought of them all. She thought of Julia Finch, who had died 5 years ago in a system that valued efficiency over empathy. And she thought of Frank, who had loved Julia enough to buy an entire hospital chain to keep other families from enduring. The same pain. Maybe this dinner would change nothing. Maybe Frank would listen politely and decide her ideas were too costly, too complicated, too disruptive. But maybe, just maybe, this would be the beginning of something. Julia would be proud of Sarah. Pulled into the restaurant parking lot and checked her reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. Tonight she would find out which kind of maybe. This was Frank had chosen Romano's for its quiet elegance and privacy perfect. For a conversation that might change the future of healthcare. He'd arrived early, reviewing notes about St. Mary's Hospital, trying to form coherent thoughts. But when Sarah walked in, right on time, wearing a simple black dress and holding a leather portfolio, Frank forgot everything he had rehearsed. She looked nervous, determined, and beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with fashion. She looked like someone who had spent her whole life caring for others, and was now ready to fight for the chance to do it better. Thank you for coming, Frank said, standing as she approached the table. Thank you for asking, she replied, taking her seat and setting her portfolio beside her plate. I brought some things I thought you might want to see. Your ideas for reform, among other things. The waiter came to take their drink orders. Frank watched Sarah's face as she scanned the wine, list thoughtful, grounded, quietly strong. Eyes that saw through to what mattered, smile that hadn't had much reason to surface lately. When the waiter left, Frank spoke first. I should start with an apology. For what? For what you experienced at St. Mary's yesterday? The way Dr. Hamilton treated you? The way the system treated you? Shouldn't have had to go through that just to help someone in pain. Sarah turned her water glass in slow circles on the white tablecloth. I've worked at St. Mary's for 8 years. So what you experienced? That wasn't unusual. It was typical for uninsured patients. That's the problem, Frank said. I know, but you need to understand something. What happened to you wasn't a fluke or a few bad apples. It's systemic. It's built into how we operate. Tell me, Frank said, leaning in. Sarah opened her portfolio. She pulled out charts, graphs, pages of notes of VAs, emergency room wait times. Insured patients average 45 minutes. Uninsured, 4 hours and 20 minutes. Frank studied the numbers, his jaw clenched. Time doctors spend. With patients based on insurance status, insured, 12 minutes. 6. And most of that spent explaining what we can't do without payment. She laid out more data. patient satisfaction by income level, readmission rates for those who couldn't afford follow-up care, staff turnover in low-income departments. Frank's anger grew with each page. This isn't just bad medicine. Discrimination disguised as business. How long have you been compiling this? 5 years, Sarah said. Since Julia died. The restaurant faded. Frank met her eyes. You did this because of my wife, because of her, and every other patient we fail week after week. Julia died because she didn't get the level of care she would have received if she'd been wealthy enough for Mercy General or Presbyterian. Frank felt something cold in his chest. What do you mean? Sarah hesitated, and then she handed him one. More page, older, worn. I shouldn't show you this, but you deserve to know. Frank recognized it immediately. Julia's medical chart from her final day. The cancer specialist Julia needed, Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, was at Mercy General, one of the best oncologists in the state. She'd treated similar cases successfully, but she needed permission to treat patients outside Mercy. Frank's hands trembled. I don't understand. St. Mary's wouldn't pay the consulting fee. They had our general practitioners handle her case instead, despite lacking the experience. The paper fell from Frank's fingers. My wife died because they wouldn't spend the money. She died because the system values profit over people. And she wasn't the only one. Sarah reached across the table and took his hands just like she had 5 years ago. This is why I collect data. Why I work doubles. Why I get written up for bringing patients blankets. Because every day, people suffer while the system forgets we're supposed to heal, not just process. Frank stared at their joined hands. And for the first time in 5 years, he felt something other than grief. What do you want to do about it? Sarah smiled and his heart skipped. I want to turn St. Mary's into a place where insurance doesn't determine care, where we hire doctors who care about healing, not profit, where nurses have time to comfort, not just monitor. That sounds expensive. It is, she said. But it could be more profitable in the long run. She handed over financial projections, solid, well-researched, convincing. Higher satisfaction means better reimbursements. Lower readmissions mean fewer penalties. Better staff retention saves training costs. If we invest $40 million over 2 years, we could increase revenue by $12 million annually and save $8 million in penalties. Frank scanned the figures. Every number checked out. He put together a $40 million proposal. During your lunch breaks? Sarah laughed. The sound warmed his chest. I did. Because watching the system fail people every day was unbearable. Frank looked at Hertha, woman who had held Julia's hand, and felt something shift deep inside. Would you work with me to implement this? What do you mean? I want to hire you. Director of Patient Experience and Quality Improvement? Full authority. $50 million budget. Your own team? Sarah blinked. Frank, I'm a nurse. I don't have an MBA. You have something better: experience, data, and heart. That's more than most executives. You're serious? I walked into St. Mary's planning to tear it down. You changed my mind in 10 minutes. If that's not a reason to trust you, I don't know what is. Tears welled in her eyes. You think this could work? Think you're brilliant. And I think Julia would be proud. Sarah squeezed his hands. She loved you, Frank. She knew how hard you tried. She'd love what you're doing now. Will you help me build something she'd be proud of? Yes. On one condition. Name it. Start tomorrow. First thing. Frank smiled. That's your condition? There are people suffering today. I don't want to waste another second. Frank looked at her and felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope, and maybe something more. Tomorrow morning it is. They sat in silence, the kind that comes from shared purpose. Can I ask something personal? Sarah said. Of course. What? Have you been doing these past 5 years? Frank exhaled slowly. Working, building, surviving, telling myself it was in Julia's memory, but mostly trying not to feel. Sarah's eyes were soft with compassion. That's not living. That's just surviving. I know, but maybe now. Maybe I'm ready to try living again. She smiled. Good, because we have a world to change. Frank raised his glass. To changing the world, to building something beautiful, Sarah said, in Julia's memory. And as their glasses touched, Frank let himself believe that the best parts of life might still be ahead. Silence settled over the conference room as the weight of what had just been proposed began to sink in. $50 million, Margaret Chen repeated quietly. Frank nodded. 50 million. He glanced at Sarah, then addressed the room. Sarah has developed a comprehensive plan that reimagines every part of patient care. From the moment someone enters our hospital to the moment they leave, symptoms anymore, we're creating a space for healing. Helen Fitzgerald raised her hand. Sarah, what do you need from us? Sarah smiled, and Frank felt that now familiar warmth spread through his chest. I need your honesty, Sarah said, gently. Tell me what's working and what's broken. Share your ideas of the wild ones that feel impossible or expensive. And most importantly, trust that we're serious about building a hospital that helps you do your job better while taking better care of patients. When do we start? One of the younger nurses asked. Today, Sarah replied. This week. I'll meet individually with each department head to discuss specific changes and timelines. But there are some things we're implementing immediately. She pulled out her tablet and consulted her notes. First, effective immediately, we're eliminating registration fees for uninsured patients. Second, wait time goals will be the same for all patients regardless of insurance status. And third, we're launching a patient advocate program. Someone will be assigned to every family to help them navigate the system and ensure their needs are met. Frank watched as the atmosphere shifted. People weren't just listening anymore, they were believing. This wasn't another short-lived policy stunt. This was a structural change. Any questions? Sarah asked. Dr. Hamilton raised his hand again. What about physicians who don't want to participate? Frank's jaw tightened. Dr. Hamilton, these changes are not optional. They're policy. Any physician unwilling to provide equal care to all patients regardless of incomes welcome to seek employment elsewhere. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, with Sarah confidently answering detailed questions about timelines, staffing, and operations. Frank was struck by her deep knowledge, preparation, and calm under pressure. When it ended, Helen Fitzgerald approached Sarah with tears in her eyes. I've worked here for 22 years, she said. I became a nurse to help people. Somewhere along the way, it became about quotas and moving people through. But what you're describing, that's why I started this career. That's exactly what we're doing, Sarah replied. Hugging her, Frank stood quietly in the corner, watching Sarah offer comfort and inspiration. His admiration had grown into something else, something deeper, something that scared him, because he knew exactly who Sarah was and how deeply she was connected to the most painful moment of his life. He was falling for her. **, Mom. You did what? Emma Adams stared at her mother across the breakfast table, toast frozen halfway to her mouth. I accepted the job, Sarah said calmly, though her world had flipped in just 12 hours. Director of Patient Experience and Quality Improvement. Yesterday, you were a nurse. Today you're a director. Emma blinked. It's kind of a leap. Sarah poured herself more coffee, trying to buy time to explain something she hadn't quite wrapped her own head around. Emma, you know how I've been frustrated with the healthcare system for years? I mean the notebooks you fill at 2 a.m. because you can't sleep thinking about your patients? Yes, those notebooks. Sarah smiled faintly. Turns out Franklin Finch wanted to hear those ideas, and he's giving me the authority and the budget to implement them. Emma set down her toast and looked at her mother intently. Are you sure about this? You barely know him. What if he changes his mind? What if it's some kind of corporate trap? Sarah had asked herself those same questions all night. Frank was a powerful man worth hundreds of millions from a world she barely understood. What if this was too good to be true? But then she remembered the way he had listened, really listened to her ideas. The way his voice had broken when he talked about Julia. I think he's genuine, Sarah said quietly. And even if this all falls apart, I'll know I tried. That I fought to make things better for people who need it most. Emma nodded slowly. Okay, but what if it works? What if you actually change the system? Your life will never be the same. Sarah felt anxiety twist in her stomach. Was right. If her reform succeeded, she'd go from an anonymous ER nurse to a leader with regional and possibly national attention. She'd be invited to conferences, asked to speak, and consulted by other hospitals. That thought was thrilling. Terrifying. We'll figure it out as we go, she said. Emma studied her. And what about him? Do you like Franklin Finch? Sarah blinked. What do you mean? You get that look when you talk about him. Like you used to with Dr. Peterson before you found out he was married. Sarah flushed. Emma, this is professional. He's my boss. Hung, Emma said. And Sarah considered dodging the question, but Emma could see through her. He's brilliant, kind, and genuinely committed to improving healthcare. He listens to me like my ideas matter, and yes, he's handsome. There it is, Emma grinned. The real reason you're nervous? Sarah sighed. Emma, I can't be attracted to him. He owns the hospital and his wife. She was one of my patients. Mom, his wife died 5 years ago. You didn't cause it? And being drawn to someone who shares your values, that's not wrong. It's complicated. All the best. Things are, Emma said wisely. The question is it good, complicated, or bad complicated? Sarah thought of how Frank looked at her when she spoke about change, how he made her feel seen. I think it might be good complicated. Then, stop overthinking. See what happens. But if he hurts you, Emma added, I'll make his life miserable. Sarah laughed. How? I'm 16. I own social media. Trust me, I have options. I love you, Emma. Love you too. Now go change the world and try not to fall in love with your boss. I make no promises. Okay. Frank spent the morning in back-to-back meetings, reviewing legal risks and budgeting every dollar of Sarah's plan. He was exhausted, but thrilled and distracted by her. Every time he saw Sarah talking with nurses, reviewing charts, he felt that same rush. She moved through the halls with quiet authority and treated everyone with equal respect. That, to him, was real leadership. Mr. Finch. His assistant appeared in the doorway. Call from the board. They want to discuss the $50 million allocation. He'd been expecting this. Put them through. The call lasted 45 minutes. The board was cautious, skeptical, and uneasy about placing such power in the hands of one nurse. Franklin said, Chairman Henley, Are you sure this woman has the expertise? Frank's jaw tightened. Sarah Adams has developed the most thorough, ethical, and financially sound reform proposal I've ever seen. She's not a manager, another board member said. She has 8 years of frontline experience. She knows what patients need because she's been there with them. Is this about the hospital where your wife died? One asked gently. Are you sure you're thinking clearly? Frank looked out his window and spotted Sarah in the parking lot helping an elderly man out of a van. I've never been more certain of anything, he said. And if I'm wrong, I'll take full responsibility. But I'm not wrong. The board reluctantly approved, but Frank knew they'd watch every number closely. Failure wasn't an option, not for Sarah's sake, not for the patient's. His assistant returned. Sarah Adams is here. Send her in. She walked in, laptop in one hand, folders in the other, and a smile that made his heart skip. How's your first day? He asked, terrifying, exhilarating, overwhelming, she said. Taking a seat. The staff is ready. People want this. Change. Some resistance. Yes, Dr. Hamilton is grumbling. Margaret's worried about money. But we're tracking everything: satisfaction, readmissions, retention, finances. If something's not working, we'll adjust. Frank studied her timeline. This is exceptional. When did you do all this? I couldn't sleep. Stayed. Up till 3 a.m. I'm just so excited, Frank. He looked at her. Sarah, why did you take this job? Shh. You could have stayed where it was safe. She paused, looking out the window. You told me you were surviving, not living. That's what I was doing too. But now I have a chance to help thousands. I couldn't say no. Frank stared at her, heart full. She wasn't just capable. She was extraordinary. Are you okay? She asked softly. I was just thinking how lucky I am that the universe brought us together. Sarah blushed. I'm grateful too. I didn't expect to find someone who understood this work like I do. They sat quietly. I should get back, Sarah said. Probably, Frank replied, not moving. She turned to go. Then paused. Would you like to meet my daughter? Frank blinked. Emma. She's curious about my new job. I think I'd like to meet the person making it possible. I'd love to meet her. Dinner tomorrow night? Just pizza at our place? It sounds perfect. After she left, Frank stared out the window. He was falling in love with a woman who had saved him in ways he didn't yet understand. And for the first time since Julia's death, he felt truly alive. Emma stood at her mirror thinking. On the one hand, Frank had made her mom happy, happier than she'd seen her in years. He listened. He respected her, gave her a real chance to make change. But he was rich, powerful, from another world. What if he broke her heart? Emma, can you help with the dough? Sarah called from the kitchen. Emma walked in to see her mom, nervous but glowing, in jeans and her favorite sweater. Are you sure about this dinner? She asked. You don't want to meet him? I do. But once I meet him, I'll form opinions. You know how I am, Sarah laughed. That's exactly why I want you to meet him. Emma studied her. Are you falling for him? Sarah froze. I've known him 3 days. That's not an answer. Sarah sat down. I don't know. He's kind, brilliant. He listens. But he's also the man who owns the hospital. He was married to a patient I couldn't save. And I'm scared. Emma reached for her hand. What if it's not a mistake? What if everything that happened brought you here for this moment, this change, this man? Sarah stared at her. That's either very wise or very naive, maybe. Both, Emma said. The doorbell rang. That's him, Sarah whispered. Relax, Mom. If he's good enough for you, he's good enough for me. And if he's not, I'll figure it out in 10 minutes. Sarah opened the door. Frank stood there, holding flowers and wine. These are for you, he said. Offering the bouquet, Emma appeared beside her mother. You must be Emma, Frank said. She's told me interesting things about you, Emma replied coolly. Come. In pizza's almost ready, Frank followed them inside, and Emma watched him closely. He was handsome, polished, but he looked at her mother. It's like she was the only person in the world, maybe, just maybe, and this could be something good. They're modest. Living room, filled with secondhand furniture and Emma's colorful drawings on the walls, didn't seem to faze Frank at all. He didn't look uncomfortable or out of place, just curious and quietly respectful, like he truly wanted to understand how they lived. Emma, your mom tells me you're an honor student, Frank said, easing onto the couch as Sarah arranged flowers in a vase. I do okay, Emma replied. What about you? My mom says you own hospitals now, but you used to be a doctor, right? Why'd you stop? Sarah looked up, clearly alarmed by the blunt question. But Frank didn't flinch. I stopped practicing medicine because I got interested in how hospitals work behind the scenes. I wanted to understand the system so I could fix what's broken, especially for patients. Did it work? Are hospitals better now? Emma asked. Frank paused. Not yet, but your mom and I are working on it. Emma studied his face. No slick charm, no rehearsed lines. Just quiet regret and something else real. Determination. My mom said you lost your wife 5 years ago. Not in the hospital where she works, Sarah added quickly. That's private. It's okay, Frank said softly. Yes, Emma, I lost my wife to cancer. And the care she received wasn't what it should have been. I've spent the last 5 years trying to make sure no other family has to go through what we did. Emma tilted her head. Is that why you gave my mom this job? Because you want her to help fix what happened to your wife? Frank looked at Sarah, then back at Emma. I gave your mom this job because she understands patience better than anyone I've ever met. The fact that she was there for Julia, it made me trust her. But that's not why I hired her." Emma nodded, processing it all. "Do you like my mom?" "Emma," Sarah groaned, her face flushing. "I like your mom very much," Frank said calmly. "She's brilliant, compassionate, and brave enough to risk her career to make things better. For people in pain." Emma smirked. "That sounds like more than just liking her."
Oh.
Frank glanced at Sarah again. Whatever passed between them in that moment confirmed Emma's suspicion. Her mom was falling for this man, and he clearly felt the same way. "Your mom is an extraordinary person," Frank said. "I'm lucky to know her." The oven timer dinged. "Pizza's ready," Sarah announced, more grateful than ever for the distraction. Over dinner, Emma peppered Frank with questions about his business, the reforms, even his opinions on college debt and climate change. He answered every one thoughtfully, never talking down to her, which earned him serious points in her mind. He helped clear the table without being asked, complimented her pizza skills like he meant it, and listened to Sarah's work stories like they were the most important things he'd ever heard. By the time they moved to the living room for dessert, Emma had reached her conclusion. Franklin Finch was a good man. A man shaped by loss, yes, but one who wanted to do something meaningful with his pain. He wasn't just interested in her mom as a colleague, or even as a romantic partner. He saw them, Sarah and Emma, as a package deal. He respected that, Frank. Emma said during a lull, "Can I ask you something personal?" Sarah warned. "It's fine," Frank said. "What do you want to know?" "If your wife were still here, if you could have dinner with her tonight, what would she say about the changes you and my mom are working on?" Frank went quiet, his expression softening. Julia believed healthcare should heal people, not profit from them. She volunteered at free clinics. She hated how poor patients were treated differently. "I think she'd be proud of what we're doing, and what would she say about my mom?" Emma, Sarah began, but Frank didn't hesitate. "Think Julia would have loved your mom. They shared the same heart, the same fight. I think she'd be grateful that someone like Sarah is helping fix what we couldn't fix together." Emma nodded, satisfied. "Okay, I approve." Sarah laughed, flustered. "You asked for my opinion," Emma said with a shrug. "And I think Frank's a good guy. He cares about what matters. He treats you like you matter." Frank smiled. "Thank you, Emma. That means a lot." "Good, but just so you know, if you hurt her or break your promises, I'll make your life miserable." "Emma," Sarah gasped. "It's okay," Frank said, still grinning. "Emma, I promise I'll never intentionally hurt your mom. And if I ever do, you have every right to hold me accountable. Deal." Emma extended her hand and they shook on it. As Frank got ready to leave, Emma hugged her mom and whispered, "I like him. I think he's good for you." Sarah walked Frank to the door. Emma, pretending to clean the kitchen, eavesdropped. "Thank you for dinner," Frank said. "And for letting me meet Emma. She's amazing. She likes you," Sarah said, both relieved and terrified, which is a big deal. Emma sees through people. "I like her too. She's smart and loyal, and she loves you fiercely. She's intense about people she cares about. If you stick around, she'll probably keep interrogating you." "Hope she does," Frank said. "It's been a long time since someone cared enough to ask." Emma smiled to herself. Her mom was falling for Franklin Finch, and from what she saw tonight, maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe, just maybe, he was exactly the kind of man her mom deserved. Frank drove home with his thoughts racing. The dinner had stirred something deep in him. Not just because Emma was sharp and brave, but because Sir watching her be a mother, warm and protective, had touched a place in him he thought had gone numb. He missed this. He missed being part of a family. At his penthouse, the silence felt even heavier. He poured himself a glass of wine, stared out at the city, and thought about Emma's bold questions. And Sarah's laugh. He picked up his phone and called the one person who might understand. "Hey, Frank," his sister Diane answered. "You okay?" "I think I might be falling in love," Frank said. Long pause. "Are you drunk?" "Maybe." "A little, mostly confused?" "Who is she?" He told her everything about Sarah, Julia, the job, the dinner, the So let me get this straight, Diane said. You met a woman 3 days ago who held Julia's hand when she died. You gave her a $50 million reform project. Now you're at her house bonding with her daughter. And you say it like that. It sounds crazy. It doesn't sound crazy. It sounds like you're finally ready to live again. Frank's chest loosened. You really think so? I think you've been punishing yourself for Julia's death for 5 years, and maybe this woman is the first step toward forgiving yourself. But what if I'm just projecting? What if I like her because she's tied to Julia somehow? You had dinner with her and her daughter? Did you enjoy it because of Julia? Or because of them? He thought about it. I enjoyed being with them, he said honestly. Then stop overthinking. Just see where it goes. But promise me don't hurt this woman. She's trusting you. Be worthy of it. I will be, Frank whispered. I want to be. He sat in his apartment and imagined what it would be like to come home to laughter. Instead of silence. To be part of a family again, it scared him, but it also gave him hope. For the first time in years, Frank Finch was ready to find love again. Frank took a deep breath and looked into Sarah's eyes. The way you fight for patients who can't fight for themselves, I admire it more than I can say. It's watching you work, it's like watching brilliance in motion. You make me want to be a better man. His voice trembled as he continued. Love Emma's wit, her wisdom. And I love that you raised a daughter who thinks your happiness is her mission in life. I love your modest apartment, your homemade pizza, even the way you fall asleep on the couch after too many double shifts. Sarah let out a tearful laugh. You've been paying attention, Sarah, he said softly. I've been paying attention to everything since the moment I realized who you were. And what I've learned is, I want to spend the rest of my life paying attention to you. Her breath caught. Are you proposing? Not yet, he said. But I want to someday. When you're ready. When we've figured out the professional challenges. When you're sure this is what you want to. Sarah was quiet. The silence stretched. Frank's heart pounded with fear. Had he said too much? Then she whispered, Frank, I've loved you since the night you met Emma. Maybe even before that. When you told me I saved Julia from dying scared and alone. Relief washed over him. I've been afraid to say it, she continued, because all of this feels too good. To be real, you're brilliant, successful, condemned. You make me feel like my work has meaning. But I'm scared that loving you might mean losing myself. You live in a world I don't understand, she said. A world with more money than I'll see in 10 lifetimes. With rules I don't know how to play by. Frank took her hands gently. Sarah, I don't want you to change anything to fit into my world. I want us to build a world that fits us both. What does that even look like? She asked. It looks like waking up in your apartment, helping Emma with her calculus homework. Pizza on Tuesday nights? You telling me about difficult? Patience and the quiet miracles of healing.
Elvis.
Sarah smiled through her tears. That sounds wonderful, but what about the hospital? The board? The media? Everyone's going to have opinions about the CEO dating an employee. Frank had already asked himself these questions 100 times. We'll be open with the board. Keep our boundaries clear at work. We'll face the public together. As a team. And if they make you choose, she asked, her voice shaking, if they say it's me or your position? Frank looked at her, the woman who'd made him feel alive again, and knew the answer without hesitation. I built this company to honor Julia's memory, to fix a broken system. And you're helping me do that in a way I never could on my own. If they can't see that, then they don't deserve either of us. You'd give it all up. For me? She asked softly. I'd choose us over everything. Sarah leaned forward and kissed him sweet. Sure, and full of promise. And for the first time in 5 years, something inside Frank healed. I love you too, Franklin Finch, she whispered. Completely. Desperately. In a way that terrifies me and gives me hope. He kissed her again, deeply this time. So what now? She murmured, when they pulled apart. Now we figure out how to be in love while running a hospital and raising a teenager. That sounds complicated. The best things usually are, Frank said, thinking of Emma's wise words. But I'd rather have a complicated life with you than a simple one without. They spent the rest of dinner making plans, sharing dreams, and rediscovering hope. That night, Frank walked Sarah to her door. She invited him in for coffee, and they ended up on her couch until 2 a.m., talking, laughing, kissing perfectly at ease. "I should probably head home," Frank said. Reluctantly, "Probably," Sarah said, still holding his hand. "Emma's up early for school. She doesn't need to see me doing the walk of shame," Sarah laughed. "Frank, Emma knew we were in love 10 minutes after meeting you. Still, I want to do this right, earn her respect, prove I'm worthy of being part of your family." Kissed him again slow, loving, certain. "You already are. Frank, you have been since the day you chose to build something beautiful instead of tearing it all down." Frank drove home with a full heart, his mind racing with thoughts of their future. For the first time since Julia's death, he felt joy, not just purpose, but nothing could have prepared him for how fast that joy would be threatened. The article hit the Metro Herald just 3 days later. Headline: "Hospital CEO's Secret Romance. Love story or ethical nightmare?" His assistant stormed into his office holding the newspaper. "Sir, you need to see this." Frank read with growing fury. The article revealed private dinners, Sarah's promotion, and questioned her qualifications, suggesting she'd been hired due to romantic favoritism. Worse, it cited anonymous hospital staff expressing concern over ethics and preferential treatment. Before he finished reading, the phone rang. "Franklin, we need to talk. Emergency board meeting." "1 hour," said Robert Henley, the board chairman. "Robert, this is garbage. Sarah's the most qualified professional I've worked with. I don't care about the truth right now, Franklin. I care about how this looks. We've got investors, regulators, and shareholders to answer to." Frank hung up and immediately called Sarah. "I saw it," she said. "Frank, I'm so sorry." "This isn't your fault," he replied. "The article makes it sound like I slept my way into the job. Like you only hired me because you wanted to date me. Sarah, anyone who's worked with you for 5 minutes knows better. But what about the people who haven't? The board, the media? What if they believe it?" Frank's blood boiled. "Where are you?" "At home. I called in sick. I couldn't face the stares, the whispers. I'm coming over." "No. If reporters see you..." He looked out the window and saw a news van already parked across the street. "It's too late," he said, "but I'll fix this. I'll find out who did it, and I'll clear your name." "What if you can't? Then I'll still stand by you." His assistant knocked again. "Sir, it's time for the board meeting. I have to go," he told Sarah. "But we're going to face this together. And if they make you choose, I already have, every single time I choose you." Sarah stood at the window, her arms folded tightly as she stared down at the parking lot. News vans were still parked outside, their presence a constant reminder of the media storm that had erupted around her. "Frank," she said softly, "it doesn't matter what we know. What matters is what the board believes, what the media reports, and what the public thinks. And right now all of them believe I'm just a nurse who seduced a grieving widower into giving her a job she didn't earn." Frank stepped beside her and gently took her hands. "Sarah, if you resign now, you're validating every lie in that article. They accused you of sleeping your way into a job you weren't qualified for, but we both know that's not what happened." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "But Frank, I'm guilty of falling in love with my boss." "That's exactly what the article says." He looked at her, steady and calm. "What if I told you I have proof that this entire smear campaign was orchestrated by someone with a financial motive to destroy the reforms we've worked so hard for?" He pulled a folder from his desk, filled with documents, emails, and phone records. "James Morrison, the former director of this hospital, has been feeding stories to Janet Collins at the Metro Herald for months. He's financially invested in companies that profit off the old system. The more patients suffer, the more money he makes." Sarah scanned the documents, her fingers trembling as she traced the connections. "This proves he had a motive," she said, "but not that he planted the story about us." Frank met her eyes. "It does. Morrison is the source. I have a plan to expose him. But I need you to trust me for 24 hours. Don't resign. Not yet." She hesitated. What kind of plan? Frank took a deep breath. Press conference. Tomorrow, I'll go public with everything, the real story of how you were hired, what you've accomplished, and how our relationship developed. I'll expose Morrison's corruption. All of it. Sarah's heart pounded. What if it backfires? What if all they care about is our relationship, not the truth? Then at least we'll go down fighting. But I believe we can win this. I'd rather lose my career fighting for you than keep it by abandoning you. He cupped her face gently. Sarah, you're the best thing that's happened to me since Julia died. I'm not going to let anyone take that away from us. Were tears spilled over her lashes? What about the board? Your empire? Everything you've built. Julia used to say that some things are worth losing everything for. Love is one of them. Truth is another. And protecting the families who rely on this hospital, that's the most important thing of all. Sarah looked at him, this man who had once been so guarded, now willing to risk everything for her. What do you need me to do? Show up tomorrow like you belong here? Because you do, believe? Just for one more day that truth and love are stronger than lies and fear. She leaned in, kissing him softly, desperately full of hope. Okay, she whispered. 24 hours. But if this doesn't work, if we lose everything, I need you to know loving you has been worth it. Frank smiled. We're not going to lose. We're going to win. And tomorrow night, we'll be celebrating with Emma and planning our future. Sarah smiled through her tears. And for the first time since the article dropped, she let herself believe it might actually be okay.